Good morning. I'm really excited about this series. This is the messages from the planets. I have here symbol, metaphor, archetypes, and myth. This is the language of the subconscious, and the planets are often associated with how we receive these messages. So this is going to be a series that I'm going to be doing about the messages that each planet provides for you. I'm going to go through each of them today. So I'd like to start with the universal laws. First is the principle of mentalism, all is mind. Everything that's happening in your world and what you consider your world is just a reflection of your mind. It's all illusion, nothing is real. The only thing that's real is vibration and energy. So anything in the form is earthly, anything in the form will die. And that's important, but we cannot connect to the higher planes of the universe without form. So the planets serve as sort of an intermediary for us to know what's happening in the higher levels. And that corresponds to the principle of correspondence, which is as above, so below. So whatever's happening in our earthly realm is correlated to what's happening in the higher realms that we don't have access to because of our dense earthly body. So I want to talk a little bit about God as form. I channel a lot of beings. I connect with Jesus. I connect with Abraham Lincoln. I have my own sort of personal spirit guides. And it's super important to have this conversation because I think a lot of times people actually get caught up in the form. So let's talk a little bit about the sixth and the seventh chakra. The sixth chakra is known as the Ishvadevatar, and it's God as form. That's why I talk about dethroning your parents, and every single person, place, thing, or situation is your mother of your father. And that's why the chakra is a circle, it's a void, it's your throne, and mom and dad are on the lotus petals on either side because they are the ones that gave you your body. They're the ones that gave you your thoughts. They're the ones that gave you your siblings, your genetics, your consciousness level, your desires. So they are the reason you are who you are. So we have to honor that. And every person, place, thing, or situation is simply reflection of something in your psyche that's linked back to your mother and your father. In the seventh chakra, God has no form. So what myth and archetype and symbols and planets and everything in spirituality is simply an attempt to teach you about the God within. And humans do not have the capacity to do this without a form. We do not have the ability to understand the vastness of what we are, of who we are, the vastness of the universe. So we have no choice but to tackle this with images and symbols and archetypes and myths. And that's why the language of the universe are those things, planets included. So Ramana Maharishi said, the man who has the sense of the body, being the body, the material world, being himself, cannot possibly worship God as formless. We do not have this capacity. When we talk about the transcendent, we're talking about the seven chakras and beyond. We basically go in there, drop in there for a second, and we're right back down to the first chakra. It's just the cycle. Whatever worship he makes will be worship in form alone, not otherwise. We don't have the capacity. So that's why fighting around religion is simply silly, because there's a Jesus, there's a Mary Magdalene, there's a Mother Mary, there's a Krishna, there's a Shiva, there's a Kali, there's a Thoth, there's a Ra, in every mythology that we have just personalized as religion, depending in which way we want to see God, what form, what story we're buying into. And as I've said before, from your 0 to 7, you get your religion. Your mother and father are your gods. You get your costumes, you get your customs, you get your people in your religion, you get your tribe. All of that is simply your personal mythology, and you can make that into a full religion, and you do. That's exactly how you live your life. So here I just listed some archetypes, some gods that we see throughout tradition, mythology, Christianity, Egyptian, Hinduism, so that you can understand that every religion has this, and you are simply connecting to a form of something higher in the universe and something within you that unless you give it a name and a shape and a form and a color, you won't be able to identify it. So Demeter or Gaia, we see as Mother Earth, or we see in Greek mythology as the form of mother. That's our moon and the planets. The sun could be Ra, Mercury is Thoth, Mars could be Arjuna from the Bhagavad Gita, Venus, Kuan Yin and Mother Mary, Jupiter, your guru, and however you have your guru. I love Krishna Das, and I listen to his music every morning. And he always talks about Babaji, his guru. His guru is the form that he gives to God, that he gives to the Jupiter in his psyche. Saturn, oh, I forgot to put that there. Kronos, which is the limitation. Uranus could be Abraham, the father of the multitudes that we see in the Abrahamic religions. Pluto could be Kali. Chiron could be Jesus. Lilith, Mary Magdalene. It does not matter what you believe in, Hellenism, Hinduism, Jainism, all philosophies, all religions have these archetypes. There's 12, they live in your psyche, they are you. Connect to them at whatever form. I connect very much to Hanuman. So he is one of the forms of God that I resonate with. So this is important because we talk about our spirit guides and we talk about talking to Jesus, or in my case, all these, spirits come through and I channel for clients. It's for the client to identify with that archetype in them. So if a client needs a Christian lens, the guidance will come through in a Christian sacrament sort of way. It's for the client, it's for them to understand the message. That's all it is. It's all the same energy, but we need the form in order to understand. So this series is about messages from the planets. If you're one like me that resonates really with astrology and the planets and the archetypes that way, this will be for you. So this is my spiritual adulting map. We're going to go up the ladder and we're going to take the full round to from the moon all the way to Lilith and all the way back to Venus. And there's two types of Venus. So we're going to start at Artemis, moon, Apollo, sun, Aries, Mars, Hermes, Mercury, Zeus, Jupiter, Aphrodite, Pandemia, Venus, Uranus, Kronos, Poseidon, Hades, Pluto, Chiron, Lilith, Black Moon, and then all the way back to wrap up the age of Aquarius is to become the Aphrodite, Urania, which is the agape love and loving thy neighbor as thyself. So I really want to have a strong emphasis on the spiritual adulting part, which is right here. Chiron leading to Black Moon Lilith. So the illness or the return home, the processing of emotion, desires, and thoughts that lead us to unmasking ourselves, no longer afflicted by these thieves, and the thoughts that lead us back to the Venus, which is the Aphrodite Urania, which we're going to discuss in detail. So in my spiritual adulting map, I want to sort of concentrate just a bit on the archetypes of Chiron, Lilith, and then bring you back here to Venus. The reason that illness, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, that illness or the body is sort of the vehicle, if you will, to learn the truths, is that all thought is energy, and it's materialized and it needs a vehicle to sort of be processed through. And then once you process the truth, the grief, whatever the issue is, then your body's somewhat affected. And this could be to develop cancer, this could be depression, or it could just be a headache and a simple day. So thought is materialized in the body. This is Chiron. This unprocessed emotion, and I have a whole theory about emotions to feelings, is processed because illness in our society is the only permissible path to truth over here, hidden truths in Lilith, and eventually self-love and agape love in Venus. My mission is that people don't have to go through 5 years of cancer and radiation and chemotherapy and all the nonsense that I created in order to be able to say, no, I can't, or a permissible reason to have a bad day, or just grieve, or take a day off, or take a month off. We have to create in our society a receptacle so that people can grieve in the open and be sad in the open without being uncomfortable, that we can carry other people's pain. The hidden truths are found in Lilith. It's all about removing the masks, those thieves that steal your peace. So in the deadly sins in Christianity, the thieves in Sikhism or Jainism, they're thieves because they steal the peace of your state of mind. And so we have to remove the veils, and they're oftentimes wrath and gluttony and greed and attachment and delusion. And we'll see more of that in future conversations. If we indeed process the emotion, make it a feeling, and use the body as a vehicle, as it's intended to be for the thought, and we don't let it accumulate, years and years and years of unprocessed emotion, and we actually feel what we feel when we have to, we get closer to the truth of what we need to see in ourselves, remove those masks, and this leads to self-love. Only with self-love can we actually have agape love. So I'm going to start with all of the planets according to my spiritual adulting map. So I want to just preface this, and I said it before. We as human beings need image. We need some form of God, so to speak, in our psyche. And sorry, I'm having a trouble with the... We need a form God in our psyche. And the planets, for those of us that maybe don't believe in a God form because there was abuse or there was religion just didn't serve our needs, have been led to astrology. And it's just another way of having a form of God. So if astrology is your religion, so to speak, or your belief system, it's absolutely fine because it's sort of parallel with all others. Obviously, it's one that I subscribe to. So I'm going to go through the 12 planets, and they each have a specific message for you. Now, if you're into astrology, then you're going to look to your sign in your house to see how you live that particular message out. But the message is the message is the message. And I'm going to be doing much more in terms of a series according to the messages of all of the planets. So please know this. When you're talking about your spirit guides, or you're talking about an archangel, or you're talking about a mythological character, the planets are at the equivalent level to Kuan Yin, or to Demeter, or to Jesus. It's the form that your psyche needs, that it subscribes to understand the archetype that is in your head, in your mind, so that you can get the message in your language. When I'm talking to somebody and they need to talk Christianity, I use Christian metaphor. If someone needs yoga language, I use Yoga Sutra language. I shift according to what they want so I can speak their language. It's the myth of the Tower of Babel in the Bible. And so our gods, or our archetypes that we subscribe to, our myths, our symbols, are the same thing. They're there to help us learn the lessons in the psyche so that we can get to know each other better, ourselves better. So the first planet is the moon. She's the mother and motherly love. This is different than erotic love. She rules emotions, and she gives you the definition of love. This is what I call the Costco card. This is your manger. This is your low consciousness at the moment of conception, and this is mass consciousness. I equate this to a honey pot. Imagine an apple dipped in honey, and you trying to take out that honey and wipe it down and get rid of that to move into the sun, which is next in Leo. You can't. It's sticky. It's very messy. This is our consciousness level. Anyone who thinks that spirituality is easy, what I call sticky note spirituality, because of this concept, is fluff. This is a lifetime's work. That apple is your soul. That's your sun. And it's covered in thoughts, emotions, and desires like honey. And to take that away so that you can actually see your soul and have a directed purpose in Leo, in the sun, is very hard. And it's a lifetime's journey. So the nonsense of thinking that we're going to raise consciousness because of crystals and pendulums is just sticky note spirituality. The thief in the moon is gluttony. Gluttony can be emotional, can be physical, can be sexual, can be hoarding things, emotions, spiritual experiences. This by no means has to be something tangible in the earth element. The myth and archetype is Artemis. She was the huntress. She actually birthed her brother Apollo and never gave any attention to herself. And the moon has no light of its own. That's why it's a trick. The message is you're not picky. Low consciousness is sticky. Emotions are exhausting. They are your favorite orgasm, tying up your libido. You're not picky because what you're resonating with is a vibration, not a face. So the myth or the metaphor that I use, if I'm your OBGYN and I hand you a baby and it's just a ball of energy, you're going to say, Francis, where's my baby? Because you associate the baby with the body, with a form. Same reason why we need form for God. But really, that baby chose your vibration and is the same. And this goes for our partnerships, it goes for our job, employment, everything is just a vibration. If we were able to strip away what we're getting enamored with and illusioned with, the body, the face, the personality, these things that are what we are not, as the Vedanta says, we are not our body, we are not our emotions. We're able to strip that, which is the honey, we're going to be left with a really nice apple that's the soul, and that's the vibration. But the mass consciousness and the moon doesn't let you do that. Your emotions are exhausting. If you take a piece of a pie, you'll see that you spend probably a lot more time on emotional attention on things than you should. And it's where you spend a lot of your time. So it doesn't matter what your life looks like physically. If emotionally you're tied up into the emotion, you're wasting your time. For those who have a value of hard work, you'd be surprised how lazy or sloth-like you are based on the attachment to your emotions. And our biggest orgasm is tied up in our emotion. We each have a preferred emotion. Mine used to be hopelessness. So identify your preferred emotion, depression, anxiety, panic, escapism, whatever it is, that's where your libido, to use Freud's term, is tied up. You have no time or space for any other thing. The sun. The sun is the apple, the soul. The soul is directed, but it's so wrapped up in that honey, in that low level consciousness, that it's not able to be directed and shine. Words are father, masculine light. The thief of sun is pride. The myth and archetype is Apollo. Apollo was the twin of Artemis, who's the moon. He was birthed right after her, and he got all of the attention. He was also Zeus's favorite son. The illness is the heart and the right eye. I don't know if I told you what the moon illness was. Breast, stomach, left eye. And the message is to get a spiritual STD. An STD is to say, think, and do. I hear nonsense all the time in my practice. I feel guilty. Guilt is a placeholder emotion. It is a lie for something less socially acceptable. When you show up at a party that you don't want to be at, you've just created karma in the name of the right thing to do and a good person. That's conventional morality that creates karma. That is good girl, good boy. Conventional morality has nothing to do with integrity. Do not kid yourself. When you say, think, and do, that's integrity, whether someone's watching or not. And that's related to the solar energy. Mercury keywords are siblings, cousins, how you lie, cheat, steal, think, and your rational mind. The thief is deceit and greed. The myth is Mercury, Hermes, and he's the eternal child. He stole Apollo's cows. He had a plan, a scheme. It's how you manipulate. You play psychological musical chairs in your psyche. You recreate your whole life with the same characters, trying to pretend that you figured out life, and it's nonsense. It's all a lie. So he stays the eternal child because he's given the role of upper world and lower world, messenger to the gods. So he never has to be on earth. The symbolism of never coming to earth is that he will never die. So we stay an eternal child. Illnesses are respiratory system linked to never growing up. If you never leave the womb, then you don't breathe on your own. And your extremities for greed is part of the symbolism. His message is your life is built on a lie. You play psychological musical chairs to never know yourself. He rules illusions. He rules veils. He rules everything you're enamored with in other people, especially teachers. Mars. Mars keyword are young males, type of man the woman likes, ego, directed divine will. Only once you get a spiritual STD can that apple, so think of the apple as the spirit circle here, get its direction. So many people come, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? The purpose is to live your soul's journey, but you can't if you're smothered in the honey, from the honey pot, with the thoughts, the desires, the emotion, the lies, and the deceit. The thief is anger. The myth and archetype is Aries or the warrior. Illness is head and injuries. The message is anger is caused by not having strong boundaries, people pleasing and violating and betraying your values and philosophy of life. If you can't say no, if you can't set a limit, if you don't know you're 48 to 52, if you're not dethroning anyone who tries to come into your kingdom and take your throne, you are going to have anger, some version of anger or wrath. If you don't know your philosophy of life, which most people don't, they don't know their rules, their rule book, they don't know their values in defined and measurable terms, you will inevitably have anger. The problem with Mars is its ego. It seeks validation needs. So you'll do all these things that are false so that no one sees the true you. Venus. Now there's two types of Venus. This Venus is Aphrodite pandemia. Okay, pandemic. Pandemia comes from the second chakra of erotic love. This is not agape love. Love women how men like their women. Eros love, not motherly love. The thief is lust, greed, and desires. The myth is Aphrodite pandemia. She was born from the sperm of the castration of Uranus, that famous Botticelli painting that Aphrodite comes out of the conch shell. The conch shell is representative of the vagina. It's linked to sexuality, hence the lust. The thyroid, the skin, and the neck are the illnesses, and that can include fifth chakra things. The message is don't get stuck here. The material world is only half of my story. This is linked to Taurus and Libra, which love sex, which love money, which love material things. That's the earth here with the cross. This is the spirit, and that's her message to us. Don't forget to balance spirit and matter. Jupiter. Keywords are crazy uncle, teacher, mentor, party animal. The thief is gluttony, sloth, and escapism. The myth or the archetype is Zeus. Zeus got the biggest piece of the pie when the world was divided. This archetype is about excess, abundance. We love to say that in spiritual New Age terminology. It's all about escapism, not confronting, never staying put, party, drinking, sex. He was the whore of the zodiac. So of course, that crazy uncle is super fun. They travel, they teach you things. They're the ones that buy you the cigarettes when your parents won't at 18. The illness is the hips and the buttocks. Buttocks obviously is linked to the sloth, and hips is linked to gluttony. It's about the wideness, so to speak, of the body, symbolically. The message is get everyone and anyone off the pedestal. Zeus is that favorite teacher, that favorite guru, that favorite uncle. Any person that you have on a pedestal needs to get the hell off. In the age of Aquarius, there's no savior. You and I are equal. We are equal to God. We have the universe in us. We are the servant to everybody equally. Stop the nonsense that you're a child of someone. And when you put someone on a pedestal, it's in relationships like in the psyche to mom and dad on the pedestal, who were your gods up until 12 years old. All you did was replace mom and dad, or maybe you didn't, you keep them there, with someone else. That's why in the 7 gates is any person, place, thing, or situation that takes up the pedestal is mom or dad. And anyone off the pedestal. If you like something about somebody, it's because you have it in you. And if you don't like something, it's because you have it in you. There's no need to have pedestals. You can admire people and respect people, but stop putting people on pedestals. Saturn, keyword, stern parent, respected, grandparent, authority figures, limits, and karma. The thief is inflexibility. The myth and the archetype is Kronos or Saturn. Kronos and Saturn were dethroned by Jupiter. When you are conceived, the body that you get limits you. So you feel very restricted with Saturn. Anything in your life is archetypally Saturn if it limits and restricts you. The illness is the structure of the body. So for instance, osteoporosis or your vertebrae or teeth, for instance, anything that provides structure. Message, I am the answer to all of your problems and I lead you to freedom. This is structure, boundaries, limits, saying no, the 48 to 52. That's why Saturn is considered the planet of karma. It's also the planet of alchemy that leads you from lead to gold. Uranus, keywords are chaos, freedom, independence, nonconformity, and disruptor. The thief is wrath, just like anger. Mythology and archetype is Uranus. He was castrated. He is the sky. He's considered the sky god, and he was castrated here, his testicle. His illness is the circulatory system. That's everything in the body that's air or ether element represents the universal consciousness. Uranus is the sky god. It's the symbolism of the element in your body. Freedom lives in your mind, not in your bank account, schedule, or having a boss, that should say. Unshackle your thoughts, desires, and emotions for true freedom. Going back to the metaphor of the apple in the honey pot. It's not the apple skin, it's not the seeds, it's not the honey. Well, it is the honey actually, because it's the thoughts, the emotions, and the desires. Once you strip that away, you stay confined, so to speak, in the apple skin, but you don't feel limited by the earthly container. On the contrary, it makes you feel safe that you can actually see the magnitude of the universe in you because things start to happen because you've made them happen. Neptune, keyword snow globe, my language, lack of clarity and boundaries, savior, rescuer, passive aggressive, codependent. I can go on and on. The thief is delusion. Mercury and Neptune work hand in hand. They're always about lying and delusion and keeping you veiled so you don't see the truth. It rules mental illness because we don't necessarily see that we're creating the nonsense, and it leads to some mental illness. The mythology and archetype is Hephaestus and Poseidon. Poseidon rules the oceans. Hephaestus was kicked out of Olympus to live at the bottom of the ocean. The bottom of the ocean is symbolic because we don't know what's down there. We assume there's dead bodies and treasure, as is true in our psyche. There's dead bodies and treasure in our psyche, in our 12th house, anything to do with Neptune and Pisces, but we don't shatter the snow globe so that we can do the discovery process of snorkeling down or scuba diving down to the depths of our psyche to figure out. The addictions and feet. Why feet? Feet, because Pisces don't tend to be very grounded. This is sort of the universal spiritual sign. And a lot of Pisces, myself included, dissociate from the body. And we have to have some sudden illness or something like I did to kind of get back into the body because we tend to float. And so the feet is discernment. Watch where you're walking, watch carefully, have a plan in the earth. The message is, I am your biggest obstacle to knowing yourself. I told you that Mercury lies to you and Neptune keeps you in the snow globe. With Mercury and Neptune, it is practically impossible to know yourself if you don't shatter those things. Pluto comes to shatter those things. Pluto keywords are perpetrator, control freak. There's jealousy, there's possession, there's envy. It's all of sort of those darkest nights that we try to hide. Thief, control, ego, envy, jealousy, possession. The mythology is and the archetype. Hades is also known as Pluto. Dispater is also known as Pluto. Pan is also known in the mythology as Pluto, and Lucifer, of course. All of these live in the underworld. It's symbolic of the psyche, the depths of the psyche. So if you want to get to that Neptune, if you want to shatter the snow globe in Neptune and remove the veils of Mercury, you need Pluto. You need a perpetrator to sort of force you into looking at yourself. We usually don't do that. The message is perpetrators are our biggest liberator. Whoever perpetrates you actually gives you permission and liberates you, helps liberate you of the lies so that you can see the thieves in your subconscious. I consider myself a spiritual perpetrator where I shatter snow globes so that people can be exposed to truth and then decide to do the work or not. The illnesses are cancer and reproductive issues. Chiron, I'm going to spend a little time here because it's super important, specifically with the link to the age of Aquarius, illness, this pervasive, the COVID, the death, the mental health issues, the dying, of course, everything that happened in the past year. The words for Chiron are the wounded healer. The thief is a spiritual sloth. If you are a wounded healer, you're healing others and you haven't healed yourself. There is no pride in being the wounded warrior or the wounded healer. Heal thyself, then mirror and model for others how to heal themselves. So you're a spiritual sloth in the sense that you're being lazy spiritually because you think it's in healing others and you haven't given yourself that same gift. The myth and archetype is Chiron. He sought answers outside of himself. This is where the age of Pisces really harmed us. We were told pedestal, Jesus, savior, rescuer, outside of self. The spirit is within, the soul is within, the answers are within. And Chiron, after a long 48 to 52 years around the zodiac, finally came back home to self. We were all forced to come back home. Whether or not you went to self or not was your business. But everyone universally was forced to come back home. This was the beginning of the age of Aquarius. So we need to get gods and guides and all the nonsense off of a pedestal and understand that this is being created in our psyche so that we know ourselves, aspects of ourselves. I obviously connect to spirit guides. It's my highest self. I understand that the image is what I need, the form I need to communicate to the client, and for me to understand the lesson that I need to take away from that. But do not give power and put spirit guides and archangels and these godheads that are just form the power. Recognize that this is in you. It is you. And the way that you are seeing it, you are clairvoyant when you see these images, is because that's the form you need to understand yourself better. GI issues, this is important. We're going to talk a little bit about this, where you try to purify. The 0 to 100 is an attempt to not slow. It's like Mercury, heaven, upper world, lower world, upper world, lower world. 0 to 100 swings, trying to not see ourselves and be here now. So when we purify with organic juices and whole food, or laxatives like I did during bulimia, or man cleanse if it's sexuality, whatever your purification needs to be, it's really from your thoughts. Save your money at whole paycheck and look at your thoughts. If you have shit thoughts, you will have an impure body. Your body's going to be impure anyway, but you can't start the purification process, which is truth 6 in the model, if you haven't looked at your thoughts, your desires, your consciousness level, and your emotions. It just doesn't, it can't happen. So if you're not looking at those things, eat McDonald's every day. It's the same thing. Basically, you process those thoughts through your intestines. I see a lot of people with GI issues. This is linked to the 3rd chakra, self-worth issues, lack of self-worth issues. If you've got gluten issues, if you've got dairy issues, if you've got diarrhea, if you've got constipation, if you've got IBS, any of that upset is linked to impure thoughts. You have to start at the thoughts, then go to the body. The message is you can only heal yourself. The answers are within. So why is this important? Chiron is the 48 to 52. I told you that at 48 to 52, he comes back around in the zodiac and he brings you back home to self. Your deepest, darkest wound is by house and sign in your chart, linked to the moment of conception. When your parents shatter the snow globe and they basically send you the message that you're unworthy and you're unlovable, it creates the wound in Chiron by house, excuse me, by house and by sign. This is truth 6 of the model. It's the truth of purification. Food and exercise is an attempt to purify the impure thought. Your impure thoughts are channeled through the body and take up most of the system. You are a glutton with your thoughts, emotions, and desires, and they need somewhere to go. So the vehicle is the body. When you start your return home, your food and exercise might suffer. And I've said this before. You have to give your parents an offering or a sacrifice. We tend to give them a sacrifice. One of the things that I ask clients is, how did your parents reward themselves and punish themselves? Usually what you do in terms of purification or self-destruction is linked to how your parents rewarded themselves or punished themselves. And we tend to repeat that. The other question I ask clients when working with this is, how did mom, usually mom, take care of you when you were sick? She rushed you to the doctor, you probably became a hypochondriac. She took you to eat pancakes, guess what? You suffer maybe from obesity or addiction to sugar or diabetes. It's directly linked the way mom, and it could be dad, took care of you with how you're going to deal with illnesses and stuff when you're trying to purify. So what happens is when you start doing this inner work over here, most of us don't have this space. We have work and family responsibilities, leisure, food, and exercise, okay? So friends is in here, loved ones, etc. This piece of the pie, if you happen to have it, is very, very small. Maybe you dedicate 5% of your 100%. This is systems theory. Everything is a system. 7 gates is an individual system with yourself, your parents obviously in your head. Truth is in the triangle is your relationship theory, dethroning Olympus is your family systems theory. And now this age of Aquarius, universal servant or world servant is a universal or a world theory on how to show up as a whole individual so others have that permission. What tends to happen is we don't have much attention to our spirit. And if you happen to be like me, that it was all spirit, then you didn't have attention to your matter. So don't think that one is better than the other. It has to be balanced. When you start doing your thoughts, desires, and emotions, that starts to take up more space. So what happens is your food and exercise regimen tends to reduce. You can't really change work too much of your family responsibilities. So it tends to be food and exercise, which is your purification or your leisure. So people say, oh, I've gotten so lazy. when they start to work with me regularly, or I don't exercise as much, or I eat a lot of sugar this week. This is expected because I told you in the moon, it's linked to diet, it's linked to food. So when we're dethroning our parent, we absolutely go into sacrifice or offering mode, eat unhealthy, make bad choices. It's fine. We'll purify the body in truth 6, but truth 1 is the truth of thought. Truth 2 is the truth of desire. Truth 3 is a truth of emotions and breath. If we don't do those 3 truths, there's no point in having $10 juice and organic food. It makes no sense. So once you really start peeling away that honey and you start living in your STD, then you worry in truth 6 what you're eating and how to purify. And you're going to notice that you're going to have more of 48 to 52 with your food and your exercise. You're not going to have to validate so much by being running all the time or being at the gym all the time, because now your body is viewed what it really is supposed to be, simply a vehicle for the soul to do its purpose. And since it's going to be directed, you don't have to hold on to the validation of all the image of how good you look. Plenty of exercise and eating well most of the time is sufficient. If you don't eat well or exercise, it's reflective of the hoarding and gluttony of thoughts, desires, and emotions. So a lot of times people are like, I can't exercise, I don't eat well, I just can't. It's because the gluttony is taken up from all that honey in the thoughts, emotions, and desires. When you liberate this through the spiritual truths, you start exercising and you start eating better. Just slowly and gradually it becomes sort of part of your life. If you overdo food and exercise, you're still tying up the system with gluttony. This is a way to hide your lack of self-worth. And so you hide in the guise of bodybuilding or working out all the time or being a runner all the time, excessive. And if your whole entire life is caught up in exercise and food, again, that's the earthly element. If we go back to Venus, you aren't balancing it with the spirit. So in Ayurveda, there is 6 stages of disease, and it's called samprapti. I am writing a book on the wisdom of the psyche and explaining how the physical homeostasis helps us, but the psychological homeostasis hurts us. For instance, the moon is linked to the emotions, and it keeps us in child in the fight or flight in the limbic system and does not allow us to move forward. The body's homeostasis is different, but the psyche's is harmful. So I'm taking this concept of samprapti from Ayurveda, and there's 6 stages of illness. In the Western world, we usually, by stage 5 and 6, is when we actually diagnose disease in the Western world, when something has been manifested as an illness or a zit or something that looks dangerous, and differentiation when it's maybe spread into other body parts. So I'm using this concept for Chiron. And one of the things I'm working on with clients is trying to get them to notice when we're immediately psychologically accumulated. Accumulated is directly linked as a word to the moon, which is the first stage of the spiritual adulting process. So the moon is here. You sense an agitation. You breathe to get out of that emotion. That takes you from child to teenager. Then you can make a choice. You have a right to free will at that moment. You're in your intellect. And then you could choose to go into child or go into adult, spiritual adult. That's up to you. But at least the breath, once you identify and get out of the emotion, the breath takes you to the sun, which is the intellect. That's not enough, unfortunately. We need the intuition, but this is a really good first start. If we can identify just a subtle accumulation, that someone says something to you and it pulls you in, you take yourself out of that, you can have psychological samprapti. That doesn't lead to illness. It's just a simple disturbance, your body giving you an emotional cue that something needs to be looked at. The second stage is aggravation. This is like increases like. You are just like the person that aggravated you. If they said lazy or if they do something you don't like, it's you. Just ask the question, where are you exactly like this? This is Mercury and it links to your thoughts. So now we've attached emotions and thoughts. The third Samprapti level is spread. This is Mars. This is anger. I told you earlier that when you have anger, it's because you violated a boundary. It has spread. You have let someone come into your kingdom, or you have entered someone's space and kept them from feeding and flying. You haven't maintained your 48 to 52. That's selfish, not selfless. Self is the boundary that we don't like to have with Saturn, and why Saturn's message is that he's the answer to all of our problems. The fourth stage is localization. This is Venus. This is where it hits you, where it hurts. Your image is affected, your desires are affected, something, maybe your pocketbook, maybe you gained weight. There's some issue in Venus, in your Eros, in your second chakra. It doesn't look the way you want. Your illusion is sort of being tampered with there. The fifth stage is Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. You either escape, you either go full blown and your typical pattern, your karmic pattern, and you call it the thing that happens to you all the time, or you go right into your toxic water theory, drinking, smoking, gambling, sex, shopping, whatever that is. So in manifestation, we're in full blown escapism or poor coping, which is another form of escapism, or falling prey to our typical patterns so that we can be victim. And then lastly is differentiation, ruled by Uranus and Pluto. This is full blown chaos. This is where you blow up your life. At this point, you have a loss, destruction. Maybe the perpetrator has showed up to take something from you. You call it a mistress per se, and it's just something that needed to blow up the system in terms of your Sampraptis to force you to look at stuff. If you are looking, let me just take you back to this chart. If you are looking at your thoughts, desires, and emotions, you can avoid all of the other stages, maybe just stay at accumulation and aggravation that constantly keep you there. And then you can avoid a full-blown illness. And lastly, the black moon is the darkest point in the chart, and she keeps you miserable until you liberate her. You can only liberate black moon Lilith by removing the veils. So you need the Neptune shattered snow globe. You need the perpetrator and the disruptor in Uranus and the perpetrator in Pluto to get you, and the illness factor to maybe give permission to get sick so that you can actually start doing the inner work. We need to eliminate the illness nonsense at this large scale and just go to the Samprapti early levels. Keywords are miserable, darkest point in the chart. Actually, in the sky, there isn't like a spot. It's called the apogee, and it's sort of the darkest spot of the moon, and the moon already has no light. So this is like dark upon dark. All of the thieves are here, whether it's gluttony, whether it's delusion, whether it's greed, all of them are in the black moon Lilith. Do not think you don't have all of them. You might have them in varying quantities, and you might have some that you're comfortable with, let's say anger or lust, but maybe you have difficulty with greed and gluttony. The myth and the archetype is the prostitute. Every mythology, every religion has a version of the prostitute, and it's always black moon Lilith. She's the one that holds the key in order to get healed, which is to release the masks and the fakeness of what we are. Illness or sexual issues, abortions, and infidelity, mostly. It depends where you have it in your chart, depending on sign. So if you have it in Cancer, it might be of sick children, or you lose children if it's in the 5th house of children. In the 10th house, you might constantly lose your jobs. So it depends on the sector by sign and by house in the zodiac, but these are sort of the themes. The message is liberate your lies through me. Remove your masks. This is a spiritual striptease. We see this in the Bible with the dance of the 7 veils. My book, 7 Gates, is based on the Inanna myth, where she goes to the 7 gates of the universe for the lower world to remove the veils. We have to remove our masks in order to get healthy, to be the world's servants in the age of Aquarius. She's the only creature in mythology that said, God, we are the same. We have got to stop the nonsense of swallowing our children like Lilith did, keeping them from feeding and flying, castrating them so that we have an identity, which would be the moon. This is the dark moon, and own our identity as men and women, servers of the world to other people. But we have to be honest with who we are so that we give permission for others to be honest. And this oftentimes comes with uncomfortable emotions. We gotta get comfortable with discomfort. And so she is like, you're a child of no one. That's why in all of the myths, she swallows her children. It's not that she swallows her children, it's she's saying, we're not children of God, we are God, a spark of God. And lastly, and the return home, and the answer to the age of Aquarius, and the answer to all of it, as we hear from Buddha and Jesus and Krishna, is love, love, compassion, empathy, the fourth chakra. We are nowhere near Venus plus, I call her, which is Aphrodite, Urania. She is agape love, fourth chakra. You cannot love anyone unconditionally, not your kids, no one. You don't love yourself unconditionally. You've got to get to the third chakra before you can even attempt to get to the fourth chakra. And there's a lot to do. There's many truths before we get to truth 11, which is the truth of service. There are no thieves here. Here I see you, you see me. I see the law of correspondence. We are the same. I immediately identify a judgment, relate it back to me, and it dissipates. The mythology archetype is Aphrodite Urania, the fourth chakra. She is the divine mother, the divine goddess, the divine feminine from the heart space. There are no illnesses here because we don't need to use illness. We just simply love and serve from a heart space by owning our boundaries, by knowing what we think, what our emotions are, what our desires are, and not invading anyone else's space. It is the 48 to 52. Here we balance spirit and matter. In Venus Pandemia, you were pretty much all material, the image, the sugar, the sex, the beauty, the makeup. Here we actually balance the spirit. Balance your life and you give permission for others to do the same, and you become a receptacle for humanity. So these are the archetypes. These are the planets. This is the beginning of the series of messages from the planets. So for those of you, or even if you do resonate with other archetypes or other myths or other symbols, if you're really a pure astrologer and you're an archetypal astrologer like me, these will be sort of your spirit guides. These will be the archetypes, the myths, and the symbols that you'll relate to when you're doing your intuitive work. So this is just a primer for what's to come. Thank you very much. Have a great day.